Hi everyone, I'm Nick and this is the TBT channel. This is part one of our HW97 strip down, tune and rebuild guide. There are two parts. This part is going to deal with taking the gun apart and then putting it back together. So if you watch this one and part two, which will be the what to do inside of the gun, you will end up with an HW97 that is as good or better than anything else in the world. Now, the 77 guide that I'm doing today also covers the HW97, 77. Did I just say 97 or 77? That's how easy it is to get them confused. They are essentially the same gun with a very slightly different stock, and the HW97 has a moderator type attachment at the front and the 77 has open sights. So although this is a 97, everything is the same for the 77 and vice versa. So let's take it apart and see how it goes. Now you can probably hear I'm struggling with man flu, but I don't like to mention it. You know, I'm being brave. So we'll get on and see if we can do this without too much to do. But if I do have to go for a sniffle break, I'll just do a cut, edit, run, come back. You won't even know I've gone, except I just mentioned it, so I just spoilt that anyway. Right, to work. The first thing we did was take the stock off. 2 screws at the front, 2 screws at the back. As per the tip by Alan Tippett, after taking the screws out the trigger guard at the back, I've put the rear one back in to hold that little nut in place on the record trigger unit there. So we did that. Okay, what we need to do is first of all undo this barrel nut here. That usually has an anti-bear trap underneath it, which goes here. It isn't actually an anti-bear trap. All it does is block the trigger when the lever is back, and all that means is you cannot decock the rifle. If the trigger were to fail, if the latch rod were to fail, it wouldn't save your fingers. It is not an anti-bear trap, and for that reason I would recommend you do what I've done here. Simply take it out and don't refit it. This means you have to keep hold of the lever when you are loading it, as you should do anyway. That is the safe and proper way to do it, but that does mean you can decock the gun if you need to, which in my opinion is much safer. So we undo this barrel nut. You may need a spanner to do it, but this one I've already pre-loosened to save me having to find a spanner. So that barrel nut comes out and we put it to one side, and there may be an anti-bear trap there. That will come out when we take this part out. We'll mention that again unless I forget. If I forgot, that's what that part there is. Now we've got that out, we need to remove the trigger unit, and we've got 2 pins here holding that in place. So I'm going to use my brass punch and my brass hammer to knock these through. People often ask me, several times in the last week actually, what size punch I use, and I don't know because I've never measured it. It's just the one that fit. So we're going to check that in a second. You'll see the safety catch has just popped up there. I've got the gun this way up, so the safety catch comes upwards to stop it all falling out onto the thing. Another tip that somebody's mentioned, whose name escapes me at the moment, sorry about that, but they did mention putting that in place and then putting a bit of insulating tape around there to hold it all in place, which is a good idea. But I prefer to take it out with a little spring on top. Simply because that's the way I've always done it. If I start taping things up now, I'll get confused. Here is our trigger unit with our Allen Tippett tip of putting the little nut back through the little screw back through the nut. Now, I want you to pause the video here and go to the HW record trigger unit adjustment video that we've got. Go and do that. Come back here and then we'll carry on. Oh, and another tip from Mr. Yippage is when you're doing that reset, it isn't in the video, there's a small hole there. You can put a safety pin through that hole at the top there, and that means when you're doing your practice firing and resetting, the sear isn't flying all the way to the end of its travel, which will save potential damage. So you can put a little pin through that bit there when you're doing your adjustment. So go adjust your triggers, come back, and we'll continue. Right, welcome back. Here we are. So this is the pin we're knocking out. I'm just going to measure it with my very near gauge. It's a 4mm pin. So that would mean that is a 3.5mm punch I'm using. So a 3.5mm punch is what I use. I use brass because I've got it. You can use steel if you're careful. Just be careful you don't knock anything through there. Now the next thing we have to do is take off the trigger block at the back here. Okay, now this is threaded, it's screwed on, and when these are new, they can be very, very, very tight. Okay, I get people contacting me regularly saying I can't undo it. All you have to do is carry on at it, take a brave pill and an extra Weetabix and continue, because they will come undone eventually. Once they've been off a couple of times, they're much easier. So what we need is something inside of there, okay, because it's usually tight, it won't just unscrew. Inside of there that is softer than the metal around it. So I'm going to use my brass punch here. So I've got a thicker one to hand, which I haven't. Brass punch there, okay, and we're going to put that down. My shoulder's still bad. I had an MRI last week, saw the surgeon yesterday. I've got to have surgery on that, so I'm going to be moaning about it for months to come. I'm sorry about that. Get my other pin out of the way here. So what we're doing is I've got my brass there that I've put into that slot, and I'm going to be striking downwards on this table to shock the threads into moving. Okay, I'm not trying to introduce torque, I'm just trying to shock the threads into letting go. So this hand, my left hand, all I'm doing is stopping it jumping off the table. So I've got my brass mallet, I've got my brass plug, brass punch into place there, and I'm going to strike it with my hammer. Now I'm not striking it and pulling back. I'm not going to try and pull this. I'm going to be going through, and I'm actually aiming to hit a spot 2 inches below the punch, so you follow through on the hit. So it's just like that. That went that way, and we've shocked the threads. This one's been apart a lot of times. Yours may take more than that, but all you have to do is persevere. So as we get towards the end of the thread, you can see the threads in there. As we get towards the last few, you can actually give that a little wiggle, and you can get a feel for how much tension is actually on that spring. People say, do you need a spring compressor? Strictly speaking, best practice, always use a spring compressor. But in real life, we just don't, because we know it's not necessary. Another top tip, if you're unsure and you don't have a spring compressor, wrap everything in a towel that way. Then as you undo this, any pressure is, everything's kept within the towel, stops things flying around. But what I'm going to do here is simply put that on the table and then twist it till we get to the end of the threads, keeping downward pressure. Am I off yet? There we are. Now I have very little preload in there because it doesn't need it. I'm actually running this gun at 15 foot-pounds, which is where it wants to be. So, and it's legal to do so here. There's our rear block. We'll put that to one side. Take our spring out. Now, this has already got a kit in here, surprisingly, but normally it would just be a spring and a rear guide. So take that out. And next, we need to take the cocking arm off, which is this part here. While I'm here, while I'm at this point, I'll just talk to you about my gun, this gun here. You will notice that it's a little bit shorter in the barrel than your one, but I haven't actually shortened the barrel. What I did is, normally the barrel comes to about here inside of this foam moderator, and the rest of it's just empty void. But what I did, this gun, when I got it, was a canal find. It was in very, very bad condition, badly in need of a reblue. So I took this off, which was just a case of heating it and bashing it off once the thread lock had gone soft. Took that off, and then I've bored up inside of here all the way to the front. So the barrel, instead of stopping here, goes all the way here. So I was able to push this on much further, making the gun about 3 inches or something overall shorter, which is better for balance and looks, in my opinion. I prefer it. And then all I had to do was reduce the length of the cocking arm. Okay, so the barrel is the same length, the cocking arm's been shortened and then put back on here. Then the whole thing was sent away to get reblued. It makes it more difficult to cock because you've got a shorter arm there, so it's less leverage. But that's how I did it. And if you want more details, ring me, email me, I'll tell you more. But basically what I've just told you there is how it was done. So we want to remove this cocking arm. We will get our punch back, we will use this punch because the other one flew across the room. And we're just going to, there's a pin here holding this cocking arm on. And we're just going to push him through. Like that. Oh! I'm being brave. Push that all the way through with my favourite screwdriver. There's your little pin, put him to one side. That comes out. Now, this cocking arm, I'm going to take this off here so you can see it better. This cocking arm goes directly into the compression tube, and it's got a little nubbin on the end there. What we need to do is lift it so it comes out with no resistance at all. If it's not in the right place and you just yank it, you stand a chance of breaking off that little tip on the end. They're easy to replace. I've done it several times because I wasn't patient, I wasn't careful, but make sure you are careful with that and you won't need to replace it. So the cocking arm is off, which means our compression tube and piston will slide out of the chassis. There, then the piston comes out of the compression tube. And that's it, the gun is completely in pieces. Go to part 2 now, where I'm going to show you how to tune the gun, what we do inside of it, and then we will come back to this one and how to put it all back together again. So go watch that one. I'll see you back here.